Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of METALCON Live. Thank you all for joining us today. We're delighted to have our exhibitors from METALCON with us today. Today's session, led by Mark Swaggerty and Michael Guillory, will discuss how to maximize your investment and ensure you discover your true ROI as a result of your investment in METALCON. So let me introduce you to today's presenters. We have our own METALCON, Mark Swaggerty. He's an award-winning sales leader with more than 25 years of sales success. He has consistently surpasses his targets for sales, engagements, conversions, and retention, always has throughout his entire career. And prior to joining METALCON, Mark oversaw the sales of Buildings New York, Fastener Fair, Aluminum USA, and other shows for Reed expositions. We also are delighted to have with us today Michael Guillory, who is a marketing strategist with over 30 years of leading brand and marketing initiatives for global companies. Michael has led teams for companies such as Texas Instruments, Philips Electronics, Sage Software, where he oversaw marketing events and trade shows, branding, messaging, web, social content, video production, and media relations. I think it's safe to say he covered it all. Michael has been recognized as an American Marketing Association Marketer of the Year and is listed in the DCEO Dallas 500 for most influential business leaders directory. Before I hand this meeting off, don't forget to register for our next METALCON Live. It's coming up on August 24th. It features Audrey McGarrell of the Cool Roofing Rating Council as she delves into and explains a brand new wall rating system. I think that's all I have to say today. We've got a lot to cover, so let me hand you off to Mark and Mike. And by the way, feel free to use the chat box for any questions you have during the session or any technical issues you run into. All right, Mark and Mike, floor is yours.
Excellent, excellent, Judy. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And thank each and every one of you for attending this session. Judy mentioned earlier that we would like you to feel free to use the chat because ultimately, as we get going, we want this to be an interactive session. We're here to answer any questions that you may have and to get things started. Just to get you comfortable using the chat, why don't you go into the chat and type in what company you're with and what state you're watching us from. Mike, go ahead.
Excellent. Yes, I'm interested in that as well. And again, Judy, I echo the thanks for the introduction and putting this together. What we're going to talk about today is something that really most important to me, and it's near and dear to my heart, and that is how do you maximize your opportunity when you're at a show? And when you think about it from a marketing perspective, a lot of us spend as marketers a lot of time trying to convince the powers that be what shows we should attend and why it's important for us to spend that money and how we're going to leverage this opportunity for more opportunities and revenue down the road. But sometimes as you go through the mechanics of that, you can get bogged down in just the execution of it, and it can end up being something that's just very rote and mechanical, and it's just you repeat, rinse and repeat, and you don't necessarily challenge yourself about how can we do it differently, or how could we do little things that would make a big impact for results down the road. And so I think our opportunity today is just to kind of share, and as Mark mentioned, make this a conversation about things that we could do that would have big impact that maybe aren't expensive or hard to do, but just simple little, maybe unexpected things that would not only help you stand out at the show floor in your booth presence, but also how do you manage the staff and the team that's going to be at the show? How do you leverage their expertise to help you get better results? Because at the end of the day, as a team, the goal should be the same for all of you, and that is to walk away with some great opportunities to move forward with. So that's kind of what we were going to share today, and I think we sort of whittled that down into 5 different tips or tricks, if you will, about getting started with that. And so if you like, Mark, I could maybe start with the top topic today. And that's something that is important to me and has been throughout my whole career. And that is about the kind of conversations that you have.
Sure, and I think the conversations are key in terms of getting into, how we go about doing that. And I think one of the things that you really bring to the table here, Michael, is your experience. This isn't what I think you should do, or what I read in a book that you should do, or my opinion about what I think works. We really have to look at your career and what you have been able to do as far as demonstrating results for leading companies. And ultimately, we wanted to bring that to the conversation here for the benefit of our exhibitors, because we wanted to pull it down from the tree tops and get it to the point where the rubber meets the road. And, Mike, as we were talking about this subject, one of the things that you touched on before we even started going was preparation, preparation, preparation. Could you talk a little bit to our attendees about some of the things that we do before we get to the show in terms of preparing our staff?
Absolutely. No, that's right. And Mark, you're right about the scale doesn't really matter. I mean, I've done shows where I've had in organizations where we've had 700 people attending a single show with over 12,000 square feet of space for a booth. And I've also done 10 by 10s with a pop-up behind you and thinking about how do you stand out. But I think regardless of the scale, the size and the number of people that are going to your event, the most critical thing is thinking about what are you going to do before you get there. And to me, the most important component of that is having an all hands. And by all hands, I mean anyone who is going to the show, they should be required to get together as a team, whether it's in person in the office or in a virtual call, to go through the key things you're trying to accomplish for that show. And so you want to talk about for METALCON, what do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? And they shouldn't be more than maybe 3. If you have more than 3 key goals, you're never going to remember it. But if you say, okay, we want to, get more leads, or we want to develop new business, or we want to launch a new product or launch a new offering or service, those types of things, if everyone on the team that's going to the show does not understand what those 3 key accomplishments are, it's much, much harder to achieve them because not everyone knows where your target is, right? If you don't know where the target is, how can you hit it? So getting everyone on board with discussing those goals and objectives is really important, and making sure there's alignment. Then the other thing I would say is making sure that you summarize all the details and the logistics of the show. A good practice to have is to build a show kit. And the show kit could just be a PDF document that outlines when are the show hours, when do people need to be at the booth, who needs to be staffing at certain times of the day, what meetings are going to be held, and do you have a meeting calendar that people can see and make sure it's open and you can schedule time if you have a little meeting space or a table or whatever it is in your booth. The most important thing is that that's organized and it's not something where it could feel a little chaotic. If you don't have that, because then people are like, well, wait a minute, I need to have this table because I've got a client coming and I scheduled this call in advance or whatever it is. You want that to be more organized. But then you also want to understand what other key objectives you have as a team. For example, is it to understand the latest trends and issues in the industry? Because if that's the case, then you want to have a very targeted and scheduled path for people attending educational sessions and breakout sessions or conversations so they can get information and share that with the team. So it's obviously has multiple facets, but that conversation is really key in that all hands meeting.
Excellent point. METALCON is our Super Bowl. Everybody traveling to the Super Bowl should know what position they play and what they're supposed to be doing when they get on the field. As we get ready to leave preparation, I also want to mention one of the key new hires here at METALCON is Amanda Carlo. She is one of our most valuable players because she is the sales and marketing coordinator here at METALCON. She works behind the scenes to make sure that all of the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. If you don't know who Amanda Carlo is, if you haven't heard from Amanda Carlo, reach out to me, because we can take care of a lot of issues that could potentially pop up when you get to the show before you get there, just by talking to Amanda. So by all means, many of you have already heard from her. I'm sure you've gotten 3, 4, 5 emails from her, because that's the type of person she is. But it all comes down to preparation, nailing down and buttoning down the small details so that you can focus on putting points, scoring touchdowns, making sales, and generating revenue. And with that, Michael, I'm going to let you get into conversational intelligence, because that's where you were going.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And again, leveraging those resources is awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned that. What I talk about oftentimes about conversational intelligence is how smart are you about what conversations were had at the show? One of the things that I've always like to require from the sales team that goes to a show is that they complete a small little document of sorts, whether it's on their electronic version or in print, of a summary of a conversation they may have had with a prospect. And, let's put this scenario together for a second. Let's say we're standing in our booth, and Mary walks up to the booth, and you say, "Hello, Mary, how are you?" And you ask a question of, you start with some leading questions like, what do you do? And what company are you with? Oh, okay, that's great. And are you familiar with our company? And ask if they're familiar with it, and if they are or not. You guide that conversation, but you start by asking them questions because you want to get that engagement. And then once you get into the conversation, that's your time then to tell your story, your elevator pitch, whatever it is that you do, services and products that you offer, that you go through and you understand, is this person interested in what we do or we have? Do they use a competitor's product or not? Are they familiar with you? And do they have some pending project or some pending opportunity that you want to uncover? Whether it's asking the question specifically, is there something that a problem you're looking to solve that our product or solution could give you? Let's talk about that. And if you think about those simple questions, kind of the qualifying questions, then you're getting into your elevator pitch, and you're asking them more questions about if are they familiar with you, are they using competitor products? And you whittle all that down, you can pretty quickly discern whether or not they're a valid lead for a follow-up after the event, and about how long you spend time with them, their engagement in the conversation, and the answers you get from the questions that you ask. And one of the things that I did I wanted to share with you is that little form that I mentioned. You can take this or leave it, but I created a template that all of you are happy to use. And the link to it is in the chat session. But basically, it's an electronic template that once the conversation is complete, you could ask the salesperson to quickly fill out that form. Some of them are yes, no answers, questions or whatever. And at the very bottom of the lead form, I'm going to share my screen just so that you can see the lead form I'm actually talking about here. So let me just see if I can get that going. I'm going to say, panelists. Okay. All right. So it's going to let me share it here. All right. So the form is right here, and I'm going to see. Can you all see my form there? Mm-hmm. So basically, This is just a simple form to be able to put your name, the company name, the title of the person. What was the length of the conversation? Was it less than 5 minutes? Was it less than 10 minutes? Or are they a current client or customer of yours? And are they familiar with your brand if they're not? And then what they were interested in and what problem might they be trying to solve? Are they familiar with a competitor's product? Do they use it possibly? And if so, are they satisfied or not? And if they're looking for a solution within the next 6 months, and that's an important qualifier because it gives you a sense of what's the filter for how quickly they may be wanting to make a decision. Do they have even a budget if they do, or if they're looking to add a product? But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is what you're going to do as a follow-up. And these can vary. This could be something from a call to a personal email to, sales materials or what have you, or generic thank you, and then other notes. But the purpose of this form, not that you have to use it exactly as is, because you can modify it, but it's an example that I like to add about what the importance of consistency in summarization of conversations. Because as a marketer, you want to make sure you have a good gauge of not just how many leads you got, but what were the quality of those leads. And by coming back to the office and getting all this collaborative documentation together, you could say, you know what, of the 300 conversations we had, 20% of them said they were looking for a solution in the next 6 months.
Yep.
Think about the value of that versus just saying, oh, we talked to 200 people or whatever. You want to have an intelligence about those conversations that then you can apply and follow up and follow through. So whether or not this is a handy guide or not, I just wanted to share it with you as an example, but I would impress upon you to require your team in the booth to complete this form after every single important conversation. Now, if they just have a casual, whatever, just talking to somebody and they don't have an interest, no need to fill out the form. But you do want to be able to track the ones that have very tangible conversations. And then in the debrief, when everyone goes back to the office, you can go through these forms and you can talk about them and identify the best opportunities.
It's so valuable. We're in sales. We have so many of these conversations at these shows, and without a way to track the details, to remember that you spoke about this hot and button issue with somebody, who is that somebody?
Yeah.
Which somebody in this stack of cards here, is that somebody named Ben, Fred, Jack? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I really like that, because this has nothing to do with the scale of your booth. You could buy $100,000 booth, or you could be in a 10 by 10. But when you get down to brass tacks and start identifying what it is that I talked about with who it is that I talked about, it's like picking the breadcrumbs up when you make that phone call for the next step in the sales process.
Yes, yes. And I will also share that it was sometimes the biggest hurdle to execute this properly was the discipline of each person to complete that form. And you kind of get the eyes rolling, or, oh, really? Do I have to do that? Or what? But when you think about it, if you're spending the money you are to be at the show, every single person that's participating at that show should have ownership in its success. And as I always say, every single person in your company is in marketing, because every single person represents your brand. And so you can ask them, and should be able to ask them, you know what, this is a small ask, but it's an important one. We want to make sure we document what we talk about and to whom we talk to, because that's a critical component for ROI. So it is a tough one for sure. And I don't know if anyone has any questions or thoughts about this particular idea or topic, or if you've had some experiences of using something similar or even different. I'd love to hear that. And you could put questions in the chat if you like. But I think at the end of the day, let's just think about the responsibilities of each person that's in the booth, because that is it. As the owner of the show, if you're the marketing person or the president of the company or whatever it is, you have every right to make sure that every participant in that show is adding their mark in the success of the event. And I think that this is a good way to consider that for sure. And it's interesting, Mark, because I think you and I have talked in the past a little bit about how there's sometimes there can be challenges and about someone who's a really new prospect versus don't waste my time.
Excellent. Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. And as we continue to go down this road, it really gets us to a point where we start to talk about meaningful metrics. Well, how many people come to the show? Oh, we get 10,000 attendees. Oh, sign up for that show. Or they get 7,000 attendees. Oh, sign up for that show. How many meaningful conversations and, you know, how much intelligent data did you actually derive from the show? Those are the kind of metrics that matter. But going back to what you were talking about in terms of the strategy that we go about implementing this, or the team approach, we start the engagement with the person that comes to the booth, or the person that we meet in the aisle that we pull into the booth. Hi, how are you? We ask some of those questions about their familiarity with our product, whether or not they're interested in it. As we begin to determine whether or not this is somebody that we are having a meaningful conversation with, we can also determine whether they're not. And then that's catch and release. Okay? You know, I reeled you in, you're in my booth. Oh, you're too small. Let me throw you back in. Get back into the aisle, make it somebody else. So as you begin to have some of these conversations about, you know, whether or not they're familiar with your competitors, whether or not they're actually interested in your product, I might also add this as a strategy. Have a designated hitter in your booth. If you've got somebody that's a really hot, interesting product, bring that back to a couple designated hitters that are in your booth. This is depending upon how you're staffed, and leave that very valuable hot target with that person in your booth, and go back out there and start the conversation again in terms of filtering these people, okay? Because at the end of the day, and many of us that are in sales are really good at understanding whether someone is a tire kicker or whether they're a potential product. And the beauty of this process is we're not trying to get a stack of paper that we fill out saying, you know, I had a conversation with Fred. His aunt's name is Betty. He's not interested in the product. We want meaningful slips of paper filled out here. We're not trying to get a mountain of paper filled out, I did my job. No, this conversational intelligence applies to people that are prospects. Because if you walk out of doing METALCON and you've got 10 or 15 or 20 real people, that's worth the cost of doing business, because these are the people that you're going to continue to go down the road with and make a sale. Now, certainly, if you do above and beyond that, that's fine. But we want realistic expectations. We want concrete conversations, and everybody wins as a result of that.
Yep, that's right. And I would even say that a forced conversation is a negative brand experience.
Yes.
So if you're having a conversation with someone and they aren't engaged and they don't really answer your questions and they're just kind of like in a hurry to not talk to you, don't force that conversation. Just wish them a good show. Maybe we'll see you around and move on. And so how many times I know I've been caught almost feeling like, okay, I'm not really interested in, why are you asking me all these questions? And I'm just walking around. You know, you got to be able to identify the good ones and the bad ones, because you don't want to waste your time with anyone who has no interest in talking to you. So that's an important filter to use for sure. But yeah, so waste of times are important. One other thing that I always like to think about is simple and effective ways to help your booth stand out. And so I think when I think about that, it's more than just the visible stuff. I mean, there's some typical rules of thumb that I've always used over the years where, you know, people don't read at a show. They don't sit there and see. If you have paragraphs of text on your booth, they're not going to sit there and read it. They just aren't. And you know, if you have a simple tagline, that's great. A couple of bullets, maybe that's great. But, you know, obviously big graphics that are colorful, that draw people in, maybe lighting on your booth that can help, you know, separate it from the others. Even some kind of crazy stuff you wouldn't think about, like, you know, who says you have to have black or gray carpet? You know, maybe if you have a brand color that's green, maybe your carpet is green or whatever, or blue or whatever. Think of something that helps it stand out a little bit. But there's also a few little subtle things that can make a big difference that a lot of people don't always think about. For example, how many of y'all, you see it all the time, walking down a trade show aisle, and you see a bunch of greeting desks, people with, you know, these desks in front of them, these little credenzas or whatever with their giveaways or tchotchkes on them. And that's great that they're right there, but it's almost like a barrier. If there's someone standing behind this counter, waiting for you to walk up to it, you have to walk up to the counter to engage them. I've seen this trick work really well, but some folks where if they have the space and the ability to do so, turn your greeting station sideways. So it's still right on the aisle, but then you can stand next to it as opposed to behind it. And then you're more approachable because you don't have this barrier in front of you that's just someone's going to have to walk up to and, take my order or talk to me behind this desk. And it also makes it more open. So people could walk into your space as opposed to having to walk around a greeting desk or a table. And it's kind of just it's a subtle thing, but it's interesting how you think about how that invites people into your space when you don't have this big barrier in front of you or something that you have to walk around to come in and have a conversation. So simple things like that can actually be impactful. And I've always felt like the other thing is just be friendly, stand at the edge of your booth space on the edge of the carpet and engage people. If you see someone walking, look at their name badge. Hello, John. Hi, how are you? Are you having a good show? Just trying to be friendly. I have a funny picture I have to show you because it's just, it's something that is exactly what I was trying to talk about. I'm going to share this. This is what not to do. And it's hopefully you can see this, but I took off the names of the company and blurred some text and stuff so that protect the innocent. But this is obviously someone in a booth that's sitting there on their phone. Do you really want to walk up to this person and have a conversation? Yeah. I wouldn't. I'd feel like I was interrupting something, right? But it's easy to think about what even just the physical gestures that we make in a booth or the appearance of where we are. If we're sitting down, no one's going to walk up to you if you're sitting down. They just aren't. They feel like they're interrupting you or you're not engaged. So just simple little things like that. And Mark, you may have some additional things you want to share on etiquette or ideas in the booth to help it stand out.
Sure. Mike, you sort of hit on the key ones. The beautiful thing about this when it comes to, what can I do to make my booth stand out? You notice we're not talking about spending any additional money.
Right.
We're not talking about sparklers coming up from your booth or, pyrotechnics. You've made the investment into doing the show and here you are. And Mike really just knocked it out of the park when he talked about the table set up right there in front of the booth as a barrier. Take that table with all of your tchotchkes and giveaways, move that to the back of your booth. Mike mentioned the fact that you want to be approachable, almost standing on the edge of your booth into the aisle. This is fishing. It's catch and release. Hi, how are you? You walk them into the back of your booth. You have your filtering conversation. You hand them a tchotchke. You get their business card. You write some conversational intelligence down. You release them. You get right back out there, almost into the aisle. You're bumping into people. And, Mike, when we were talking about this earlier, I really like the way that you had, sort of summed this up. You said, be approachable, be happy, smile.
Yes.
Be friendly. None of those cost an extra $1. But if you simply are smiling and you're happy to be there and you're friendly, you're gonna go miles down the road in terms of the interact. And by the way, you may have somebody that could potentially be someone you might think to be a tire kicker, but when you are approachable and friendly, you could get a whale to open up and identify themselves.
That's
because
right.
People that have it going on don't walk around with a sticker on their forehead and say, hi, I'm worth $7 billion. I've got it going on. Those are the ones that are usually guarded.
Yes.
But when you get into a conversation with somebody and you're approachable and you're friendly, you might get them to divulge some information about their capability to do business with you that they don't normally share and aren't broadcasting it to everybody in the room. Why? Because they don't want 7 million people calling them because they're rich and they got it going on like that.
Right.
So,
That's right. And you know what? And I'm a big believer that perception is 90% of the law. And if someone perceives you as being an open and friendly and approachable person, it also translates to your brand, because you're representing your brand in your booth. And so that perception is everything. First impressions is everything. And it just reminds me when you mentioned that, Mark, the other day I was at a show and I was walking by and I just about lost it because I saw this small little 10 by 10 booth and they had a table up there, and their tchotchkes they had were pens and notepads with branding logos on them and for their brand. And I thought to myself, okay, the sad thing about that is, and we live in a digital world. And here was a brand that their headline was something about leading technology with blah, 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 blah. And they're giving away pens and papers. And I just thought to myself, think about just the perception of even the tchotchkes that you give away at a show. If you don't have something that you probably would value, why would someone, I mean, the purpose of a tchotchke isn't to have a nice giveaway, frankly. What it is, it's an attraction for someone to walk up to your space and to see something, go, ooh, that's kind of cool. What's that? And then you got them walking up to your space. So it goes back to the approachability and even the simple things like tchotchkes, that the giveaways, that they're relevant to your brand or they represent it in the right way, because it could be a negative if you don't cover that, that right way. So just, I mean, you were talking about perceptions and stuff, that reminded me of that. It's kind of funny.
Definitely. And certainly you want the perception of your brand to be positive. And the reason why you want the perception of your brand to be positive is because you're exhibiting at this show, perhaps with your competitors.
Right.
Right. And so you want the perception of your brand to be positive, because I would rather do business with the positive guy than with the competitor down the road who was frowning in his booth and doesn't want to be bothered. Mike, your background is key. And I love this point that we have here as far as tracking the show activities of competitors.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because yeah, you're focused on running your plays and scoring as many touchdowns as you can, but talk to me about why it's important for you to at least get a sense as to what your competitors are doing at this show and why that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our step number 4, is talking about competitors and recognizing what they're doing. And it's we all have, every company has a competitor, whether you know it or not. Some people say, "Oh, I don't have any competitors," but the reality is you do. And so you need to understand who they are if they're at the show, and then have the opportunity to take time, whether it's yourself or someone on your team or multiple people on your team, where they have an isolated time dedicated to reviewing and walking by and looking at what competitors are saying or doing at the show. Yeah. One of them might be introducing a new product or service. And so when you walk by their space, they would share that information, whether it's in a group setting or it's on slides on a monitor or it's in a presentation that they're giving. But it's not just about getting a picture, which you do want to get a picture of the booth, by the way. You want to share all those pictures of everyone's booth, because you can bring that back and you can compare your presence versus competitors in the debrief meeting. But more importantly, though, it's about understanding what their message is. Has it changed? Are they going after a target that maybe is different than they were in the past? With a product or service that they might have, because understanding the landscape of where you fit in your competitors, within your competitors, is critical for your message to stand out. And one thing that I might just bring out as it relates to this is when you think about your messaging on your booth. So many times I've seen people just, I was talking earlier, you might remember, about don't put paragraphs of text on your graphics or your booth that people won't read, but also whatever it is you put on there, is it unique? Is it unique compared to what your competitors say? Because that's how you're going to be remembered, is by what you say that's different, that will help you stand out. So the only way you can do that is if you understand what your competitors are saying and you find a way to change up your story to be different so that it sets you apart. And so when you're looking at competitor activities, Sometimes they might be participating in a roundtable session or an educational event or a breakout session. Go to those sessions and listen to what they have to say, and then have your team report back to the whole group what they learned. What did the competitors say or do that may have been different? Or, you know what if one of your competitors wasn't there? That's important to note. You know what? So-and-so didn't show up this year. Interesting. I wonder why. Or so-and-so is new to the game. We have a new competitor that's come to the show, and you want to get as much reconnaissance information as you can so that you can be smart about what it is they're trying to approach from your possible prospects you might have on your list. So I love the value of a show isn't just about bringing people together. The value is being able to see and compare.
Yes.
And I think that that's where you have an opportunity to stand out, and that when the prospects leave the show floor, they're going to remember you versus a competitor. And the only way you can do that is if you're really smart about what your competitors are saying and doing.
Excellent. Excellent point. You know, when it comes down to weighing the value of METALCON, or for that matter, any other trade show you exhibited, yes, I understand the ledger about profit and loss and how many sales were made versus what the expenditure was. But this is an indirect, very tangible takeaway from the show when it comes to competitive intelligence, understanding your competitor's value proposition, understanding perhaps how they're selling against you so that you can preemptively address that in the sales approach. You know what I mean? So understanding their value proposition, understanding how they're going after your customers, understanding who's new in the marketplace, all of those things are very tangible yet intangible benefits that you get from being at the show. And so to not engage in doing competitive intelligence is almost malpractice. I mean, it's your money, you're here, you might as well get everything on the table that you can from the experience of doing the METALCON trade show.
Yep. You know, as I always thought about, if a competitor walked up to my booth and started asking me questions, I would probably tell them some things. I would tell them what we do, or it's, you know, it's not like it's a secret, right? But the same could be true for you. If you saw someone who was offering a competitive product and you didn't know much about it, you could just simply walk up to them and say, so tell me, you know, what is it that y'all do? You know, and they can look at your badge, they can see the name of your company, and they may or may not tell you, but the odds are they're probably going to tell you something. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's, you know, it's a competitive environment, but if they're a confident brand, they're going to, you know, have a story to tell, and they may not know who your company is, and that's okay too. I think at the end of the day, I'm never shy away from walking up and asking a question of a competitor just to understand what their pitch is or what their story is, and help me be smarter about the way they position their products. And I can tell you one thing, I did it enough times, and goodness knows CES is a major shows I did for 20 years in a row or whatever, and all our competitors knew who I was. I could never get away with it after maybe the first time. Yep. You know, but if they don't know who you are, if you have a new employee, man, send them off, go get some information.
By all means. You know, we're almost 40 minutes into this session. I want to pause. We encourage those that are watching to answer or place any questions that you have in the chat. We have a moderator that'll flag our attention to address them. But you know, at the 40-minute mark, I want to come down to basically one of the final key points that I think, Mike, you brought to the table as far as post-show priorities, and then what's the plan when it comes to what do we do with these sheets that we collected all this conversational intelligence on? I want you to sort of open up a little bit about that, and I'll certainly come back to address it as well.
Yep, it goes back to, you know, I mentioned the required all hands meeting before the show. Well, you have to have an all hands required meeting after the show. And that means you get everyone back together on a call. It's required. and everyone can share the things that they learned, the things that they did, that we can talk about any situations as far as conversations that came up, or any current clients that might have had a question or issue that you tried to solve that may have had that conversation with. But this is the time to kind of get the debrief, get the statistics together, and whoever it is that's going to run that meeting should also share some of the stats from the show, what you saw from the show, the number of leads you may have gotten, or the number of attendees of the show, and some of the good, the bad, the ugly of, getting feedback on the booth, what worked, what didn't, was there something missing? Getting that input from the team that was there, that was handling the day-to-day of the activities for the show is really key. Obviously summarizing the conversations that we talked about earlier, but I also think there's an opportunity to go around the table, and this is something that you could ask everyone to do in advance, is if they had a couple of key takeaways from the show, whether like trends that they heard about, or something that someone discussed that you weren't familiar with, that you tried to learn more about, or if you went into a educational session or something and you got a takeaway from there, have them share that with the team, because that's just collectively sharing information that could be valuable to the whole organization. And so I think there's that post show. It's so common, so common. People come back from a show and they're like, wow, that was great, man. I had some good dinners, and I met some great people, and we went to a happy hour, and I got to talk to so-and-so for 2 hours, and it was really good. And those are all great, things that happen, but they're not necessarily structured in a way that helps you understand the real value behind it. So I think having a formalized debrief and understanding the discipline of follow through on what people learned and sharing that information is a great way to summarize how the show really materialized for everyone individually, in addition to as a team.
Definitely. And, going back to those forms that we fill out, when we get to a point where we have hot prospects or people really that really have the prospect of doing business with us, number one, I'm certain or hoping that many of you are working with a customer relationship management software. No, the reason why we go with these forms is because it's so hard to remember everything that everyone we interact with and what are the details of these conversations. So you've got this information now down on a form. You want to get this information into maybe a customer relationship CRM system, customer relationship management system. And then most definitely for the hottest prospects, you want a strategy on how to pounce on those. To go to a show, to generate hot leads, and then not to have an effective strategy on how to effectively follow up on those leads, that's like food going stale. And we can't afford to have them. And certainly, I doubt that that's the case, because when we're dealing with salespeople, quoted salespeople, people that are interested in making sales, I doubt that's the case with anyone here or any of your companies. Especially, I'm sure there's probably a fight for the hot leads that come out of the show. So maybe that's just not an issue. But having a strategy in place to deal with the hot leads, to get everything entered into a customer relationship management system, you'll be surprised. Some of the people that may have said no are simply not ready. And so a lead that you could generate in the show may not turn into immediate sale, but because they're in your customer relationship management system, and because they're receiving emails and other promotional offers from your company, you may find leads that you generated at a show turning into customers just based on the ongoing interaction you are having with them with respect to emails and other offers that you're making to these people. So that's certainly something to keep in mind.
Mark, that's a great point. In fact, there's one way to consider it is having like a level 1 and level 2 description for a lead. And the level 1 would mean it's a personal follow-up with the person that had the conversation as soon as possible because they were very hot. A level 2 might mean you have a pre-written thank you email that you send like immediately after the show, or even after the end of the first day. So thank you for coming by our booth. Here's a link to more materials about it or whatever. And it shows responsiveness. And again, going back to what the perception of that is if you're responding to someone the day after you talk to them, think about how they think, wow, these folks are really on the ball. They really respond quickly. How would I do business with a company like that? Well, I'd probably want to do business with a company like that. So even if they aren't necessarily a hot lead, to have all the marketing materials pre-created and written so that you can do quick responses right after the fact has a big impact as well.
Yep. And you know what? Here's another reason why you probably want to talk to Amanda Carlo, our new sales and marketing coordinator.
Yes.
METALCON provides each exhibitor with a number of free passes. These are passes that you can invite to people that you want to come visit you at your booth at the show. We also provide you with a discount code that you can do an email promotion to your potential prospects or people that you want to do business with, to give them the opportunity to get discounted admission to the show. Here's the reason why you want to use your free passes and your discount codes. We track the use of the free passes and the discount codes to each exhibitor. You can use your free passes and your discount codes as a lead generation tool. We will send you a list of the people that registered using your discount code or your free passes so that you can reach out to them before the show and say, hey, stop by my booth and come see Fred. You could have 5 or 10 people walking into your booth asking for Fred based on using the tools that we gave you. We make a big deal about using your discount codes and your free passes. And the reason why is because if you embrace this, you can use this as a lead generation tool pre-show. And because we give you that data, you can reach out to them before the show and have them come see Fred, Jack, or Harry, or Jane in your booth. That's a home run. So hopefully you can take that and run with it.
Man, I love that. How many shows do people go to that have almost like a marketing resource as an extension like Amanda? Not many. My goodness, that's fantastic to be able to leverage that for sure. Take advantage of it. Absolutely. That's
Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful.
So do we have any other questions or any comments or thoughts, or maybe if anyone wants to share of any of the things we've talked about, something that's worked well for them at a show that for engagement or lead follow-up, open to any comments or thoughts. I think one of the things that I always remind myself is, and usually this happens, I may not have a question right away, and then all of a sudden after something, go, oh darn, I wish I had asked that question, whatever. So you can reach out to your METALCON representative or whatever, or Amanda, and ask a question after the fact too, because there's certainly ways to get answers to any of your questions that you have, because it's as we get closer to the show, obviously activities get higher. So that's important to have that resource.
Wonderful. We are recording this session, so obviously it's there to be replayed. Our email addresses are in the chat, but I'll give it to you. It's very simple. It's amanda@metalcon.com. And I am Mark with a K @metalcon.com. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for joining us. Michael, wow. Thank you for bringing your years of expertise to the conversation. I know that our attendees and our exhibitors are going to be benefited by it.
Oh, I'm happy to. Now, Judy, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just want to pipe in just one thing. Mark mentioned that we're recording this webinar, and there's a lot of great information on here. So we really encourage you to share the link with your trade show team, whether they're in the planning stages or they're going to be on site at your booth. spread the word. There's a lot of little gold nuggets that that should be shared with everybody here. So, yeah.
Great. Well,
Thank
thanks
you,
to all of you.
All right.
Absolutely. For future reference, this will be hosted on the METALCON YouTube channel. You can also find the link that links out directly to this on the metalcon.com website. If you go under METALCON all year long, under METALCON Live, you'll be able to find this and all of our other METALCON Lives.
And it's going to
Again,
be in the next exhibitor exclusive. We're going to put it in as a, I think we're going to send it out as a link.
Awesome.
fantastic. I don't think we've had any questions come through. We have had several thank yous. So thank you both.
You
We
bet.
appreciate
I'm
it.
excited. I can't wait for the show. It's going to be
Yes,
awesome.
indeed. Excellent.
Neither can we.
All
Thank
right.
you everybody for joining us today. We so appreciate it. Hope to see you at a future METALCON Live. And make sure you check your email inboxes for all of the recordings and for this recording coming through to you soon in the next exhibitor exclusive.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.